The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood silently at the window of her private quarters. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the cup of tea that had grown cold in her grasp. The news had arrived just hours before, delivered in the formal manner that royal protocol demanded. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the weight of those words. Prince William entered the room quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the ancient stone floors. His face bore the unmistakable marks of a sleepless night, his usually composed demeanor cracked by the raw emotion that threatened to spill over. The couple had faced many challenges together since their fairy tale wedding. But this moment felt different. This was not about public duty or royal obligations. This was about loss, pure and simple. The Queen's private secretary had delivered the message personally, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. Queen Elizabeth II, the woman who had been the cornerstone of the British monarchy for over 70 years, had passed away peacefully at Balmoral Castle. The woman who had guided William through his darkest moments, who had welcomed Catherine into the royal family with warmth and wisdom, was gone. Catherine set down her teacup and moved toward her husband. No words were needed between them. In that moment, they were not the Prince and Princess of Wales. They were simply two people who had lost someone they loved deeply, someone who had shaped their lives in ways the public could never fully understand. The telephone had been ringing constantly since the announcement. Prime ministers, heads of state, and family members from around the world were calling to offer their condolences. But in their private apartment, William and Catherine allowed themselves a moment of quiet grief before the machinery of royal protocol would sweep them into the whirlwind of arrangements and ceremonies that lay ahead. William's relationship with his grandmother had been particularly close. She had been there when his mother died, providing the steady presence he needed during those turbulent teenage years. The Queen had taught him about duty, about service, and about the weight of the crown he would one day wear. Now, that day had come sooner than anyone had expected. Catherine thought back to her first private meeting with the Queen, years before she and William were married. She had been nervous, uncertain about how to address the monarch, worried about making a mistake that might embarrass William. But the Queen had put her at ease immediately, speaking to her not as a sovereign to a subject, but as a grandmother welcoming a young woman into her family. The memories flooded back now. Quiet dinners at Windsor, walks with the Queen's beloved corgis, conversations about everything from royal history to modern parenting. The Queen had been particularly delighted when George, Charlotte, and Louis were born, taking genuine pleasure in her role as great-grandmother. She had insisted that the children call her Gan-Gan, a name that spoke to the warm, family-oriented side of her personality that the public rarely saw. As the morning progressed, staff members began arriving with briefings and schedules. The funeral would need to be planned, statements would need to be written, and the complex process of royal succession would need to unfold. But for now, William and Catherine held on to these precious moments of private mourning. The Queen had always emphasized the importance of family, even within the formal structure of royal life. She had understood that behind the titles and ceremonies were real people with real emotions. Now, as William prepared to become king, he carried with him not just the constitutional authority she had passed down, but the personal wisdom she had shared with him over the years. Catherine found herself thinking about their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis would need to be told about their great-grandmother's death, and they would need to understand what it meant for their family and their future. The Queen had been a constant presence in their young lives, and her absence would be deeply felt. The couple knew that in the days ahead, they would need to be pillars of strength for the nation and the Commonwealth. But in this quiet moment, they allowed themselves to feel the full weight of their personal loss. The Queen had been more than a monarch to them. She had been a mentor, a confidant, and a beloved family member. As palace staff began preparing for the formal announcements and ceremonies that would follow, William and Catherine took comfort in knowing that they would face this challenge together, just as they had faced every other challenge in their married life. The Queen's legacy would live on through them, through their children, and through the countless lives she had touched during her remarkable reign. The grand halls of Buckingham Palace had never felt more solemn as Catherine and William walked through them in the days following the Queen's death. Every portrait, every piece of furniture, Every carefully polished surface seemed to hold memories of the woman who had called this place home for so many decades. The palace staff moved with quiet efficiency, their usual chatter replaced by respectful whispers as they prepared for the most significant royal funeral in living memory. Catherine found herself drawn to the Queen's private study, where she had spent countless hours receiving guidance on royal protocol and discussing matters both official and personal. The room remained exactly as the Queen had left it, her reading glasses still folded on the mahogany desk, a half-finished crossword puzzle bearing witness to the normalcy that existed behind the crown. William was consumed with the constitutional responsibilities that had suddenly fallen upon his shoulders. As the new king, he needed to meet with the Prime Minister, review state papers, and prepare for his formal proclamation. Yet between these weighty duties, he would pause to share memories with Catherine, finding strength in their shared experiences of the Queen's kindness and wisdom. The couple had decided to involve their children in the mourning process in an age-appropriate way. 9-year-old George was old enough to understand the significance of what had happened, while 7-year-old Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about where Gangan had gone. 4-year-old Louis, still too young to fully grasp the permanence of death, kept asking when they would visit Gangan again at the castle. Catherine spent hours explaining to the children what their great-grandmother had meant to the country and to their family. She told them stories about the Queen's own childhood, about how she had become queen at just 25 years old, younger than Catherine was now. She spoke about duty and service, concepts that seemed abstract to young minds but were already becoming part of their inheritance. The planning for the funeral required delicate diplomatic coordination. World leaders were flying in from every continent, security arrangements were unprecedented, and millions of people were expected to line the streets of London. But for Catherine and William, the most important aspect was ensuring that the ceremony truly honored the Queen's memory and reflected the values she had embodied throughout her reign. They spent evenings going through the Queen's personal papers, discovering letters from world leaders, thank-you notes from children, and diary entries that revealed the private thoughts of a woman who had lived her entire adult life in the public eye. These intimate glimpses into the Queen's inner world deepened their appreciation for the sacrifices she had made and the loneliness she had sometimes endured. One evening, Catherine discovered a letter the Queen had written to William after his wedding, expressing her joy at seeing him so happy and her confidence in Catherine's ability to support him in his future role. The letter spoke of the importance of partnership in royal life and the strength that comes from having someone who truly understands the unique pressures they would face together. The media attention was overwhelming. Reporters from around the world had descended on London, eager to capture every moment of the historic transition. Catherine and William knew that their every expression would be scrutinized, their grief analyzed and interpreted by countless commentators. Yet they remained focused on what truly mattered: honoring the Queen's memory and supporting each other through this difficult time. Palace staff shared their own memories of the Queen, painting a picture of a woman who remembered birthdays, asked about family members by name, and took genuine interest in the lives of those who served her. These stories reinforced Catherine and William's understanding of the Queen's humanity beneath her royal dignity. As they prepared for the formal lying in state at Westminster Hall, Catherine and William knew that they would need to share their grief with the nation. Hundreds of thousands of people were expected to file past the Queen's coffin, each seeking their own moment of connection with the monarch who had been a constant presence in their lives. The couple practiced the complex choreography of the funeral procession, understanding that every step, every gesture, would be broadcast to billions of people around the world. But beneath the formal protocols lay genuine emotion, a profound sense of loss that no amount of training could fully prepare them for. Catherine found herself thinking about the Queen's strength during her own times of trial. The monarch had faced family scandals, political crises, and personal tragedies with remarkable composure, always putting duty before personal feelings. Now, Catherine drew on that example as she prepared to say goodbye in the most public way imaginable. The Queen's final journey would take her from Balmoral, where she had spent her last peaceful days, through Scotland and England to London, allowing people throughout the United Kingdom to pay their respects. Catherine and William would accompany her on this final journey, serving as both family members and representatives of the monarchy's continuing legacy. In quiet moments between official duties, they reflected on the lessons the Queen had taught them, about resilience, about finding strength in faith and family, and about the importance of serving something greater than themselves. These lessons would guide them in the years ahead as they took on new responsibilities and helped shape the monarchy for a new generation. The morning of September 19, 2022, dawned gray and somber over London, as if the weather itself reflected the nation's mood. Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the black coat dress she had chosen for the Queen's funeral. The outfit was elegant yet respectful, adorned with pearls that had belonged to the Queen herself, a personal touch that felt appropriate for this most solemn of occasions. William appeared beside her, resplendent in his military uniform, the weight of his new responsibilities visible in his bearing. They shared a quiet moment together, knowing that once they left their private apartments, they would belong to history. Their grief witnessed by billions around the world. Westminster Abbey was filled to capacity with world leaders, Commonwealth representatives, and members of the royal family. As Catherine and William walked slowly down the aisle behind the Queen's coffin, they could feel the eyes of the world upon them. Yet their focus remained entirely on the woman they were honoring, the grandmother and sovereign who had touched so many lives. The service itself was a masterpiece of careful planning and heartfelt tribute. The hymns were ones the Queen had loved, the readings spoke of service and faith, and the very atmosphere seemed to capture the essence of a life lived in dedication to others. Catherine found herself thinking of all the times she had sat in church with the Queen, sharing hymn books and listening to her gentle voice joining in the familiar songs. When the final blessing was spoken, Catherine felt a profound sense of closure mixed with overwhelming sadness. The Queen's journey was complete, but the legacy she left behind would continue through William, through their children, and through the countless people whose lives she had influenced during her 70-year reign. The procession through London was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Millions of people lined the streets, many having camped overnight to secure a viewing spot. As the funeral cortege made its way slowly through the capital, Catherine was moved by the genuine emotion visible on the faces in the crowd. These were not merely spectators. They were participants in a national moment of mourning and remembrance. Children held flowers, elderly veterans saluted, and people of all backgrounds stood together in shared respect for the Queen's memory. Catherine realized that this was perhaps the Queen's final gift to the nation, a moment of unity that transcended political differences and social divisions. The commitment service at St. George's Chapel in Windsor was more intimate, attended only by close family and personal staff. Here, Catherine and William could let their guard down slightly, allowing their genuine emotion to show as they said their final farewell to the Queen. The chapel held so many memories, their own wedding day, family christenings, and countless quiet services where the Queen had found peace and spiritual strength. As the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, Catherine felt William's hand tighten around hers. They had weathered this storm together, supporting each other through one of the most challenging periods of their lives. The Queen would have been proud of their strength and dignity throughout this difficult time. In the days that followed, letters and flowers poured in from around the world. People shared their own memories of the Queen, their gratitude for her service, and their hopes for the future of the monarchy. Catherine and William read many of these messages personally, finding comfort in the knowledge that the Queen's impact had been truly global and deeply personal. The children gradually adjusted to life without their beloved Gan. George began to understand his future role more clearly, asking thoughtful questions about kingship and duty. Charlotte spoke often about wanting to honor the Queen's memory through her own actions, while Louis slowly came to accept that Gan wouldn't be returning to play games or read stories. Catherine found herself stepping into some of the Queen's former roles with new confidence. The patronages and charitable work that had been so important to the Queen became personal missions for Catherine, ways to continue the legacy of service that had defined the late monarch's life. William threw himself into his new responsibilities with determination, guided by the principles the Queen had instilled in him. Every decision he made was filtered through the question of what the Queen would have done, what values she would have prioritized, and how best to serve the people who now looked to him for leadership. The Queen's private funeral was held several days later, attended only by the immediate family. Here, they could grieve as a family rather than as public figures, sharing stories and memories in the informal way that the Queen herself would have preferred. Catherine spoke about the Queen's kindness to her as a newcomer to the family, while William reflected on the wisdom and guidance that had shaped his entire life. As autumn progressed, Catherine and William began to establish new traditions while honoring old ones. They visited the places that had been special to the Queen, continued her charitable work, and ensured that her memory remained alive in their daily decisions and public duties. The country slowly began to move forward, but the Queen's influence remained present in countless ways. Catherine often found herself asking what the Queen would have advised in particular situations, while William carried forward the lessons about duty and service that had been instilled in him from childhood. Their marriage had been strengthened by this shared experience of loss and transition. They had supported each other through the most scrutinized period of their lives, proving that their partnership could withstand even the most intense public pressure while maintaining their private bond. The Queen's legacy lived on not just in the constitutional changes that followed her death, but in the personal values she had passed down to her family. Catherine and William carried forward her commitment to duty, her genuine care for others, and her unwavering faith in the importance of service above self. In their grief, they had found a renewed sense of purpose, united in their determination to honor the woman who had meant so much to them both as a sovereign and as a beloved family member.